No one in that dusty little village deep in Guanajuato had a clue that the most dangerous man among them was hiding under rags, limping on a cracked wooden cane and mocked by cocky young bullies who wouldn't last a single hit from him. They called him a bum, laughed at his frail look and tossed tamale husks and scraps of tortillas at his feet, never realizing that behind those tired eyes slept a power capable of silencing 100 warriors with one single move. That humid morning, the villagers' laughter rang louder than the bells of San Pedro Church, and no one noticed they were mocking the very legend who once gave his life to protect them. It was the day of the Sierra Roja Combat Festival, the annual event where the best young fighters from nearby towns showed off their martial arts in the square. But that year, something out of the ordinary was about to happen. 3 hotshot champions from Mexico City had come to show off. They climbed into the ring set up in the plaza, shirtless, wearing karate pants and black belts tight around their waists. Their muscles were sculpted from years in elite gyms, and their smirks said it all. They thought they were gods among farmers. The crowd went wild with every kick, every shout, every display of power. They called themselves Los Tres Hermanos del Puño. Christian, the leader, Leandro, the hothead, and Ivan, the strategist. They posed, taunted the local kids, and soaked in the applause, until Christian's gaze caught something by the food stands at the edge of the square, the old man. He limped slowly through the dust, leaning on a makeshift cane, filthy, wrapped in patched-up clothes, wearing what used to be sneakers long ago. His jacket looked like it had been stitched together from garbage, his beard covered half his face, and his eyes, dim, almost lifeless. But there was something about him that made the noise fade. The crowd parted instinctively. He moved like a ghost no one had noticed in years. The silence grew thick, like the air itself was warning them. Something's about to happen. "Hey, Grandpa, you lost on your way to the nursing home?" Christian shouted, laughing, finger-pointing for the crowd's amusement. A few nervous chuckles broke out, not because it was funny, but because no one dared cross the 3. They were known troublemakers who always walked away clean. The old man stopped, slowly lifted his head. His eyes, once dull, now burned with something ancient, quiet but alive. Without a word, he walked toward the ring. Leandro burst out laughing, and Ivan jeered, "Seriously, old man, you want to fight? This'll be over quick." The old man set his cane aside, then climbed the ring step by step, slow and shaky, as if every move might break him. To the crowd, it looked ridiculous, almost sad. One of the judges moved to stop him, but froze. Something unseen held him back. It was as if time itself whispered, "Let it happen." Inside the ring, Christian squared up, feet solid, fists raised, that arrogant grin on his face. "What's your plan, old-timer? Bore me to death with stories?" he mocked, stepping forward, and then everything changed. The old man straightened ever so slightly. His left foot slid forward, his right hand rose, relaxed. No tension, just perfect balance. The air around him shifted. It wasn't strength, it was stillness, the kind that swallows everything. For a heartbeat, nobody else existed. Christian lunged with a punch that had already dropped 2 opponents earlier, fast, brutal. The crowd gasped, waiting for the old man to crumble. But there was no impact, just a crisp, dry sound. The old man's arm moved like a blade, one strike, short, precise, to the jaw. Christian froze mid-step, eyes rolling back. His body collapsed like a sack of sand, unconscious before it hit the floor. Silence, total silence. Leandro stepped back. Ivan's face went pale. No one laughed. No one even breathed. The old man lowered his hand calmly, picked up his cane, and stepped down from the ring as slowly as he'd climbed up. Near the edge of the square, Don Alfredo, a retired taekwondo master who hadn't stepped on a mat in years, pressed a trembling hand to his chest. He recognized that move. That wasn't luck. It wasn't improvisation, it was art. The tea was a pressure strike, he whispered, awestruck, old-school style. The old man turned the corner and vanished into the adobe streets. Some swore they saw him heading toward the old mine. Others said he just faded like smoke, but one question haunted everyone who'd seen that punch. Who was he, and why now? From that day on, Sierra Roja would never be the same. Sierra Roja wasn't just a quiet village tucked between mountains. It was a place where the past seemed to breathe through the stones, the adobe houses, and the church bells that rang out stories long forgotten. With just over 3,000 people, the town was known to outsiders for its combat festival. For locals, though, the tradition was more than a show. It was a way to keep an old honor alive, passed down through generations. Everyone learned to fight as kids, not out of violence, but out of respect. Respect for the craft, for discipline, and for one's own body. And among all the families in town, the Mendozas were the ones people looked up to. Don Alfredo Mendoza, now 74, was a living symbol of that past. A former national taekwondo champion, he'd trained dozens of youngsters over the years. His children had moved away, and the village increasingly relied on outside visitors to keep the tournaments alive, which is how the Los Tres Hermanos del Puño showed up. They were arrogant, strong, dangerous. They didn't respect rules and dared anyone with sneers. To the local kids, they were stars. To Don Alfredo, they were a sure sign of decline. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for what he saw that morning. From the moment Don Mateo dropped Christian with that single strike, Alfredo couldn't stop thinking about it. He spent the afternoon poring through old books, notebooks, and training notes from his fighting days. He studied the movement, replayed it in his head, tried to imagine how the strike had been executed. That wasn't an ordinary punch, he kept telling himself. Meanwhile, the whole village buzzed with rumors. Kids sketched the old man in school notebooks like he was a superhero. Housewives whispered that he must be some retired secret agent. Absurd theories popped up on every street corner, but nobody knew where Don Mateo had actually come from. For years he'd been there, sitting on the same bench outside Doña Lupita's grocery. He lived off what people gave, spoke little, never asked for anything. When it rained, he vanished for days and reappeared like nothing had happened. He never raised his voice. He never answered humiliation. What nobody knew was that Don Mateo wasn't his real name. Decades earlier, he'd been called El Silencio, a feared nickname in the secret circles of Mexican and Latin American martial arts. He fought clean, fast, and precise. He was never beaten in real combat. Then, after an international tournament in Osaka, where an opponent died following a blow similar to the one that felled Christian, he disappeared. He was cleared. It was self-defense. But he vanished, by his own choice. The day after the incident, Don Mateo didn't show up. Humiliated, Leandro and Ivan demanded revenge. They searched the town, but no one knew where he'd gone. Even the bullies felt shaken. They'd lost more than a fight. They'd lost control. Meanwhile, Don Alfredo drove to San Luis Potosí to see an old colleague, a former martial tournament judge, hunting for answers. He showed the man the phone video a kid had taken. The colleague watched in silence. Then he said, "That movement, I've only seen it once, in an underground fight back in 1986. The fighter's name, Silencio. He disappeared after that." "You think it's the same man?" Alfredo asked. "I think you've got a sleeping legend living in your village," came the quiet reply. Back in Sierra Roja, the attentive started noticing little things. The martial calligraphy marks on Don Mateo's cane, the tiny finger gestures he made, like someone measuring breath with surgical precision. The times kids fought in the square, and he separated them with a single word, and silence fell. He wasn't just some old man. And now that he'd shown himself, nobody could say what would happen next. The morning after the festival, the town woke up different. Smiles had faded into whispers. Where routine once ruled, tension now hung in the air. an expectation that something could explode at any moment. Christian was in the hospital in the next town with a broken jaw and temporary loss of consciousness. Doctors said they'd never seen anything like it, one clean, direct strike that caused so much damage. The medical report turned into fodder for social media jokes. But to Leandro and Ivan, this was no laughing matter. Their honor was at stake. Sitting on the porch of the small boarding house where they'd crashed, they smoked in silence, muscles still tight, anger simmering beneath the skin. What should have been a triumphant showcase had become public humiliation. "This won't stand, hermano," Leandro said, grinding out his cigarette butt on the floor. "I'm gonna break that old bastard's bones." Ivan, colder, didn't answer right away. He replayed the fight footage in slow motion, trying to see how they'd been fooled. It wasn't luck, it wasn't a trick. "He used a strike you don't even see in pro tournaments," he murmured. "That's old school stuff." "Then we bury that old school with him," Leandro snapped. In the plaza, kids copied the old man. They bent their knees, lifted their hands deliberately, and mimicked the move in slow motion with bright eyes and big grins. "I'm Don Mateo," one shouted. But among the grown-ups, the mood was different. "Did you see what he did to Christian? That's dangerous. Is he here to protect us? Or to watch us? I heard he's a killer on the run, escaped from Japan." Rumors spread like dry brush fire. There was awe, yes, but also fear. And where fear lives, ignorance grows. That night, Don Alfredo slipped out with a thick envelope under his arm. He walked up to the old abandoned chapel on the hill. The doors were ajar. Inside, between shadows and dust, Don Mateo stood, not sitting, not limping. "Knew you'd come," he said without turning. "You shouldn't have revealed yourself, Mateo." They needed to remember arrogance isn't strength. "Every legend starts with a warning," Mateo replied. Alfredo handed over the envelope. Old photos, clippings, certificates, everything pointed to who Don Mateo really was. "El silencio," Alfredo read. "No more," Mateo said. "Now I'm just Mateo, just silence. Leandro and Ivan are coming back, and this time they won't stop until there's blood." Mateo sighed. Maybe it's time to teach them the value of silence. The next morning, the tension snapped. Leandro and Ivan stormed the plaza during Sunday Mass, shoving benches and yelling for Don Mateo. "You coward, come out of where you hide," people screamed. Kids cried. Doña Lupita fainted. Mateo appeared. Same calm, same cane, same dim eyes. "If you want to fight, then leave this place tonight at sunset, where they bury the dead." The old cemetery. The final arena. The village held its breath. The priest tried to stop it. The police snorted. Nobody could stop what had been set in motion. At 6, with the sun bleeding behind the peaks, Don Mateo was there, waiting. Leandro and Ivan showed up with gloves, guards, and fury. But before they attacked together, Mateo said, "You each get one chance, one at a time, like men." Pride made them agree. Leandro went first. He had power and rage. No focus. 9 seconds later, he was down from a precise knee sweep and a strike to the base of the skull, out cold. Ivan hesitated, danced around, threw high kicks. But Mateo was a rock. Every move he made seemed to answer the next one before it happened. A block, a step in, a punch to the chest. Silence. Ivan hit his knees, not just beaten physically, but beaten in his head. Mateo didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He turned and walked away. At the cemetery gate, a child held up a notebook with a drawing of him. "Are you a hero?" the kid asked softly. Mateo looked at the child and for the first time smiled. "I'm a warning," he said. The fall of Los Tres Hermanos del Puño spread through the region like wildfire. Within hours, videos of the cemetery fight were on the phones of kids from León, Querétaro, San Luis Potosí, even Mexico City. But in Sierra Roja, the impact went far beyond the views. Doña Lupita, who used to give Don Mateo stale bread out of fear he'd bring bad luck, now left him fresh bolillos wrapped in colorful napkins. She avoided eye contact, but every morning the little package sat on the same step where he used to rest. At the village school, Professor Ramiro, once a student of Don Alfredo, added a new lesson to his syllabus: honor in martial arts, using Don Mateo as a living example. Now the kids wanted to learn the old man's gestures. They copied his movements, mimicked his silence. Some even sat beside him quietly, as if they could absorb his energy through osmosis. Not everyone was thrilled with the old man's rise to legend. Mayor Saul Reynoso, a man too political for his own good, started to worry. Sierra Roja was getting attention, the kind he couldn't control, and with attention came investigation. "If this man's a legend," he told his secretary while flipping through reports about the new tourists, "then he's got a past. And if that past is dangerous, I need to protect the village and my seat." Reynoso ordered an off-the-books inquiry into Don Mateo's identity. He sent 2 men he trusted: Marcial, a bitter retired cop, Antonio, a nosy, over-eager kid. "Find out everything about that old man," he said, "before someone else does." Meanwhile, a different story was unfolding behind the scenes. Ivan, one of the Tres Hermanos, didn't leave with Leandro. He stayed, not for revenge, but for something he couldn't explain. The look Don Mateo gave him after the strike hadn't been superiority. It had been compassion, and that disturbed him more than pain ever could. Over the next few days, Ivan wandered the village, silent, watchful. He felt shame, but also fascination. One afternoon, he climbed to the old hilltop temple. There he found Don Alfredo sweeping away dead leaves. "Can I help?" he asked hesitantly. Don Alfredo didn't answer. He just handed him a broom. Tension thickened with every passing day. Mateo didn't speak, didn't smile, but his steps were lighter now. The limp was gone. His eyes, once downcast, were fixed on the horizon. It was as if the power he'd buried was surfacing again. Then something unexpected happened. Marcial Antonio, following whispers and rumors, uncovered an old record buried in the dusty files of the Japanese embassy. A name emerged: Matu Kanjiro, known as El Silencio. Vanished after an international incident, hunted by rival factions, missing in Mexico for decades. "This old man's got a past that could cost us dearly," Marcial told the mayor. "If anyone finds out Sierra Roja's been harboring a fugitive tied to international violence, we're finished." Reynoso's eyes lit up. He smelled opportunity. "Then we'll use it to our advantage," he said. At the same time, Ivan was training at the temple. He learned to breathe, to listen to the silence under Don Alfredo's guidance. His arrogance melted away. His gaze softened. He no longer wanted revenge. He wanted understanding, and Don Mateo watched like a shadow. He knew the world was shifting. He felt forces closing in. The real enemy hadn't yet shown its face, because silence always comes before the storm. The next dawn in Sierra Roja felt different. The sky was too clear, the air too heavy, and the silence was no longer reverence. It was a warning. Within 48 hours, the once quiet town had become a headline. Newspapers in Mexico City ran the story: the hidden master, living martial arts legend, reappears in small Mexican village. Reporters, thrill seekers, and story hunters flooded in. They didn't care about the village or its culture. They wanted selfies with the old man. They wanted virality, scandal, and someone decided to give it to them. Mayor Saul Reynoso, drunk on greed and obsessed with controlling the narrative, called a press conference in the main square. He had a stage built, cameras ready, and a surprise planned. Meanwhile, Marcial entered the temple with 2 undercover agents. Don Mateo was there, sweeping the floor with an old broom, Ivan beside him, now more disciple than fighter. "You're under arrest," Martial announced, proud of the words, "for identity fraud, false documentation, and illegal international combat activity." Ivan tried to step forward, but Don Mateo raised a hand. "Never resist those who don't understand what they're facing." In the plaza, the crowd gathered. The mayor took the stage. Reporters were ready. And in the background, Don Mateo was led in, handcuffed, like a dangerous criminal, a beast on display. "My dear citizens," Reynoso began, "for years, this man has lived among us under a false identity. He is wanted in several countries for illegal combat activity. Today, under proper authority, we will hand him over to the capital." The crowd murmured, confused, split. "But he protected us. This can't be true." Don Mateo was shoved toward the mic. Reynoso smiled, waiting for an outburst, an angry old man to confirm his story. Instead, Mateo simply said, "Those who know the sound of a strike can tell when it comes from truth and when it comes from fear." Then he looked straight at Reynoso. The silence that followed cut like a blade. And then Don Alfredo stepped forward. He carried an old black folder full of documents, letters, official records. He climbed the stage slowly, but with the dignity of a man who knew what truth weighed. "This man is no criminal," he said. "He was cleared in 1986 by an international martial council. What he carries isn't darkness, it's a burden none of us could bear." He walked away from the world because he understood that power without control is destruction. But now that you've dragged him back, I ask you, are you ready for what follows? Before the mayor could reply, 2 unmarked black vans screeched to a stop in front of the plaza. 6 masked men stepped out, silent, uniformed, no insignia, no flags. Not police, not government, hunters, mercenaries from foreign schools who'd lost money and prestige to El Silencio decades ago. One pointed at Don Mateo. "You owe us, Maestro. Time to pay your debt." And in that instant, chaos erupted. Villagers scattered, children screamed, Reynoso ducked behind the curtains. But Don Mateo smiled, for the first time. "I don't owe you anything," he said quietly. "But I do owe them." He nodded toward the crowd, toward Ivan, toward the children who imitated him. And right there, still handcuffed, he began to fight. The first attacker came with a curved blade. Mateo twisted, using the cuffs as a weapon, breaking the man's wrist on impact. The second rushed from behind, dropped instantly from a spinning kick, perfect even within the restraint. Reporters filmed it all. The footage looked unreal, like a movie, except it wasn't. In less than 2 minutes, 4 men were down. The remaining 2 ran. Don Mateo stopped, drew a deep breath and said, "I'm no legend, I'm a consequence." From that day on, no one in Sierra Roja called him a beggar. No one called him strange. He had a new name that echoed through the hills, El Maestro Invisible. But what no one knew yet was that this was only the beginning, because the true enemies were still coming. The morning after the Plaza showdown, Sierra Roja didn't feel like the same village anymore. The calm was thick but fragile. Dust still hung in the air. People whispered on street corners. Videos of the fight were flooding WhatsApp groups, and newspaper headlines plastered every cafe and bus stop. Homeless man knocks out mercenaries on live TV. Who is El Maestro Invisible? Mystery baffles authorities. Mayor exposes village to international crime group. And just like that, while Don Mateo became a living legend, Mayor Reynoso turned into the villain of the story. At City Hall, Reynoso was cornered. The same councilman who once backed him now demanded answers. "You put the whole village in danger bringing those men here. You lied about the old man's record. You held a press conference for self-promotion and nearly caused a massacre." Reynoso, pale and sweating, stammered, I didn't know who they were." But no one believed him. Worse, the mercenaries who'd escaped were still at large. The state police were involved now, and early investigations tied the attackers to illegal fighting syndicates in Mexico City. The name Don Mateo, once whispered in alleys, now echoed in the halls of power. Meanwhile, Don Alfredo and Ivan brought Mateo back to the temple. He was exhausted, scraped and bruised, but his eyes were steady again. Ivan soaked a rag to clean his wounds. "You could have killed them," he said softly. "But you didn't." Mateo's answer was calm, certain. "Power without control is savagery. Violence without purpose is weakness." Silence. Ivan lowered his eyes. For the first time, he understood what it truly meant to be a warrior. The village, though, was split between reverence and fear. Doña Lupita began leaving flowers at the temple. Professor Ramiro organized a field trip so his students could see where the master had trained in silence for years. Some of the same young men who once mocked the old man now practiced in the plaza at dawn, trying to copy his calm movements. Then came the idea: a school, not a modern gym, not a competition dojo, a place where discipline, humility, and tradition came first. "You should teach," Ivan told him. "I've taught enough to the world," Mateo replied. "Now it's the world's turn to listen." But Don Alfredo saw further. He knew that the name El Maestro Invisible, trending nationwide, would draw dangerous people. Those men in black hadn't been the first, and they wouldn't be the last. A week later, an unmarked envelope arrived at the temple. Inside, a photograph. A man in a dark G beside a foreign flag. On the back, scrawled by hand, "He's still alive, and he wants to finish what he started." Don Mateo stared at it for a long time. Then he said quietly, "He was my brother, and my greatest mistake." While the outside world buzzed with the legend of the forgotten master, something deeper was being born in Sierra Roja. Not just a myth, a legacy. The temple, once swallowed by weeds, was alive again. Don Alfredo and the townsfolk cleaned the stone floor, repainted the gates, hung old lanterns, and placed a handmade wooden plaque in the center hall. "El silencio también enseña." Silence teaches too. But the most striking sight was Don Mateo himself, no longer a beggar, but a teacher. He still dressed simply, yet the rags had been replaced with a worn white GI, hand-stitched by Doña Lupita. He didn't speak much, never asked to be called master, but everyone did, naturally. Classes began with just 3 students: Ivan, a young woman named Camila, once the old man's loudest mocker, and a 9-year-old boy named Tadeo, who showed up every morning before sunrise. Mateo didn't teach punches. He didn't teach kicks. He taught silence. Listen to your body before you move your arm. Feel the ground before you try to master the air. Those who seek to defeat others will lose. Those who defeat themselves will find peace. At first, few understood, but the ones who stayed changed. Camilla, once quick to argue, walked calmly now, shoulders straight, gaze steady. Tadeo stopped answering bullies with fists. Now he met them with words and balance. And Ivan, the hot-headed fighter from the capital, carried water buckets, swept the temple floor, served tea, listened without haste. "If I'd learned this way before, I wouldn't have hurt so many people," he said one evening, watching the sunset beside Mateo. "And yet," Mateo replied, "you learned." But the world beyond wasn't at peace. The name El Maestro Invisible had crossed borders. Fighters abroad spoke his name with equal parts respect and resentment. He'd become a ghost made flesh again, and that photo, the one of his long-lost brother, wasn't a warning. It was a summons. Mateo understood perfectly. "He's coming." "Who?" asked Alfredo. "The only man who knows my mistakes, because he carries his own inside him." In the days that followed, Mateo trained harder, not for revenge, but to prepare those who would remain if he didn't come back. He taught Ivan deep-breathing defense techniques, showed Camilla how to read an opponent's pattern before the strike, walked with Taddeo in silence up the hills, saying nothing for hours. "Why don't we fight up here, Maestro?" the boy asked once. "Because the body learns fast," Matteo said, "but the soul needs time." One night, Matteo climbed the temple steps alone. In the center hall, he lit a single candle. Before it, he placed a letter, his final instructions in case he never returned. Outside, thunder rolled over the Sierra Roja mountains. A motorcycle approached on the lonely road. A man in black, scarred face, hollow eyes, walked out of the shadows with steady steps. The past had arrived. But Don Mateo was no longer the same man, no longer hiding, no longer exiled. He stood tall, and those who trained under him no longer saw a beggar, or even a master. They saw a guide, because sometimes you have to lose yourself completely to teach someone the way. And now Mateo was the light for an entire village. But deep down he knew the greatest battle was still to come. The temple of Sierra Roja was no longer a place of quiet refuge. It had become an invisible fortress. Young and old trained there every day. What was once mocked now stood as a symbol of discipline. Villagers who used to ignore Don Mateo now followed his teachings with almost religious devotion. But no one knew that behind every lesson, he was saying goodbye. Ivan, now completely transformed, led the classes whenever Mateo was away. He was already seen as the natural heir to the way of silence. Camilla had honed her technique so well that she'd begun teaching other young women from the village. And Taddeo, no longer just a student, had become the master's shadow, mimicking his movements, his words, even his breathing. But he still didn't understand the weight of what was coming. Don Alfredo did. "He's not training soldiers," Alfredo murmured. "He's preparing successors." In the plaza, whispers spread about a man on his way, an international fighter, a man with no name, scars across his face, fury carved into his body. He had appeared in old footage, fighting with brutal precision. No one knew where he trained. No one knew what he wanted. But Don Mateo knew. "He's my brother," he said quietly, "by blood and by downfall." Years ago, in an underground tournament in Japan, the two had faced the same master. Mateo had won with honor. His brother had won with poison. From that day on, they'd walked opposite paths. One disappeared, the other built his own order, an empire of fear, violence, and domination. And now he was coming to close the circle. On the eve of the inevitable fight, Mateo gathered Ivan, Camilla, and Taddeo atop the hill, where no one spoke, only listened to the wind. "Tomorrow, you'll train as usual," he told them. "Don't let the silence die." "And you?" Taddeo asked softly. Mateo knelt, looked the boy in the eyes and said, "If I don't come back, you'll still know who you are." Meanwhile, Mayor Reynoso was desperately trying to win the village back, pretending to support the temple, even calling Don Alfredo a local treasure, but it was too late. No one listened anymore, and he knew if anything went wrong again, his name would be back in the headlines. He discreetly ordered 2 state police officers to patrol near the temple that night. Not to help, but to watch. At midnight, the lights in the village flickered, power cut out for a few seconds, silence returned, and with it, the man with no name. Dressed in black, tall, scarred, his eyes were dead. What he carried wasn't strength. It was old hate. He stopped at the base of the temple steps, looked up, and began to climb, one step at a time. Inside, Mateo was waiting. No cane, no uniform, no fear. The brother spoke first. "No more running. It ends tonight." Mateo replied, "Then start." Outside, Ivan woke with a jolt. Camilla felt something shift in the air. Taddeo saw the lights return and heard a dull thud echo from the temple. From his porch, Don Alfredo closed his eyes and whispered, "It's begun." Everyone in Sierra Roja felt it. The silence had changed. It was the kind that comes before an earthquake. or before a truth reveals itself. Inside, the temple was swallowed in shadows. The only light came from the central candle, trembling as if afraid. On one side stood Don Matteo, still as stone. On the other, his brother, Kenzo, the name he'd buried decades ago. Kenzo didn't speak. He circled the room slowly, studying the temple like a man inspecting ruins before demolition. "You never understood," he muttered. "Fighting wasn't about winning. It was about surviving." "And in that," Matteo said, "you killed honor, not enemies." The first strike came fast. Kenzo lunged like an animal, a high spinning kick that sliced the air where Matteo had been an instant earlier. He dodged effortlessly, like wind. But Kenzo was unlike any opponent Sierra Roja had ever seen. He didn't fight to win, he fought to destroy. Outside, Ivan, Camilla, and Tadeo sprinted toward the temple, but Don Alfredo stopped them. "If you go in now, you die," he warned. "That's not training in there. That's a war with the past." Inside, every strike echoed like old memories resurfacing. Not just physical blows, but accusations, regrets, decades of silence breaking apart. Kenzo's attacks were short, brutal, precise. He aimed for joints, trying to break, not drop. Matteo defended with fluid grace. He didn't counter, he redirected. He moved like a man who wasn't trying to win, but to save what little remained of his brother's soul. "You still think you can save me?" Kenzo shouted. "I'm not here to save you," Matteo said, dodging another deadly strike. "I'm here to stop you from dragging others down with you." Kenzo's knee slammed into Matteo's shoulder. The master stumbled, rolled, and rose again. Blood trickled from his lip. For the first time he looked tired. Time slowed. The world outside vanished. Only the two remained. Then, silence between motions. Kenzo stepped back. "You left me," he growled. "You abandoned me in that pit of monsters. You hid here, cleaning floors like a coward." Matteo stood. He untied the blood-stained band from his arm. "I hid," he said quietly, "so I wouldn't become one of you." Kenzo roared and charged. Matteo waited until the final breath, and then moved. Not a punch, not a kick, a surrender of body to perfect motion, a pivot, a redirection, two fingers pressing a single vital point. Kenzo froze mid-strike, his eyes rolled back, and he fell, not dead, but unconscious. Outside, the silence broke with the sound of a body hitting the mat. Ivan burst in. Matteo was on his knees, breathing hard. Kenzo lay beside him. Camilla and Tadeo rushed in behind. "Is he alive?" Camilla asked. Matteo nodded weakly. "Now he is, for the first time in years." Don Alfredo entered slowly. He reached out a hand. Matteo took it, but something was wrong. Matteo collapsed to the side. A dark stain spread beneath his GI. "He caught my liver before the final strike," he said, voice trembling. "We'll get you to a hospital," Ivan shouted. "No!" Matteo gripped Alfredo's arm tightly. "It's done." He looked at the three of them. "Now, you are the silence I leave behind." Tadeo, crying, held his master's hand. "You're leaving too?" he asked. Matteo smiled, one last time. "The body goes, the lesson stays." At 3:47 a.m., Don Matteo died in the arms of those who called him Maestro. The next morning, Sierra Roja woke in mourning, but not in sorrow. It was a morning of reverence. The bells rang. Children sat on the temple steps in silence. Inside, Ivan lit the central candle. Hands together, he whispered the words, "Silence teaches too." And the legend didn't fade. It spread. 2 weeks had passed since Don Matteo's death. Sierra Roja had returned to its rhythm, but something had changed forever. It wasn't the restored temple. It wasn't the viral fame online. It was the way people moved. Fights in the streets stopped. The young treated each other with newfound respect. Shopkeepers left flowers at the temple's entrance, and on Saturdays, families climbed the hill just to watch the sunrise. In silence. Ivan had taken charge of the temple, but never called himself maestro. "I'm only the continuation of something greater than myself," he would say. Camilla began teaching the girls of the village, guiding them in self-defense and confidence. Tadeo, now more mature, kept every one of the old man's lessons alive, as if guarding Don Mateo's spirit itself. The name El Maestro Invisible no longer meant power, but inner mastery. Kenzo, the defeated brother, had survived. He stayed silent for weeks in a hospital in Leon. When he was released, he vanished, but not like before. People say he was seen in small towns, teaching kids to breathe, to listen to their bodies, to fight without anger. No one confirms it. No one asks. Maybe Don Mateo's final strike hadn't been physical, but spiritual. Maybe he had awakened humanity, even in someone who thought he'd lost it. Don Alfredo left behind a letter, published in the local paper. Mateo showed us that true masters don't live on stages, but in shadows. That the strongest voice is not the one that shouts the loudest, but the one that listens the deepest. If Sierra Roja is different today, it's because one rejected man chose to teach through actions, not glory. And the temple. Today it's known as La Escuela del Silencio, the School of Silence. People from across Mexico travel there, not for fame, not for fighting, but to learn something few ever seek: balance. And every time a new student arrives, the first lesson is always the same. Before you fight, sit, breathe, listen, because here in Sierra Roja, silence became tradition, and Don Mateo became eternal. At the top of the hill, just behind the temple, stands a single stone with a quiet inscription: "Here rest the hands that never needed to shout." Sometimes at dusk, villagers say they see a figure sitting there, back turned, a cane resting at his side. No one approaches, no one speaks, they just watch in silence. Maybe it's imagination, maybe it's the wind, or maybe some masters never truly leave. If this story touched you, share it. Share it with someone who's been doubted, someone who's fallen and risen quietly, someone who carries strength without needing to prove it, because sometimes the truest masters walk among us, hidden in plain sight. Leave a comment. What did you learn from Don Mateo? And more importantly, are you one who listens or one who only shouts? The legend may have ended here, but the legacy is only beginning.